Hi, I'm Pastor Stacey McClain with the First Baptist Church of University Place. Thank you again for being with me this morning. This morning, we're going to finish up the third chapter of the book of James. So it'll be in James chapter 3, verses 13 through 18. So just 6 verses this morning. You know, today is the last day of the month of May 2020. And to say that our lives have changed is certainly an understatement. We've had an awful lot happen in our lives with this coronavirus. Some of you have lost your jobs. All of the kids have been sent home from school. They're doing all their online schooling. So an awful lot has changed. And just some of the, just the mundane things of this world. I mean, how do you occupy your time has changed because we don't have the entertainment abilities that we used to have. And some of you have used this time very positively. So a lot of you are reading more or you're studying more. Some of you have or had a whole list of projects to do, and now you're knocking those out. And you're doing a great job with that. Some of you are playing a lot of video games, and perhaps that's not the best choice. But there are things to, sometimes you've got to do something to fill your time. Now, with my family, we've been doing something which we normally don't do, and that is we've been putting together puzzles. And I think at this time we've put together 5,000 or 6,000 piece puzzles, and and that was fun. I mean, we're kind of puzzled out now, so we don't want to do any more puzzles. But so after doing so many puzzles, you get better at it. Your strategies. And Elise and Patrick in particular are very good at it. They'll take the box of puzzle pieces and they pour them out on the table and they turn them all up so the colored side's up. And then they look for all the flat pieces. And with the flat pieces, they go around and get the whole frame. And then they begin to work from the outside in, and that's their strategy. But as I was thinking about all the puzzles that we were putting together, I realized that, that's kind of an apt metaphor for what has happened in our lives. In our lives, we are people who like to control things and plan things. We have strategies, and we come up with a frame and we begin to fill it in, thinking that we have a pretty good control over things. But I think, with this metaphor, if you will, this image, what we have then is we have an arm which comes around, and the coronavirus has come around and has swept all of the pieces back into the box, put the lid back on, and has given it a really, really, really good shake. So where beforehand we thought that we had some things kind of figured out, now all of a sudden we see that our life is a little bit more of a mystery than what we had planned before. Our schooling has been affected. Our work has been affected. Our finance has been affected. Our health has been affected. Our friends have been affected. Our church, our worship, our celebrations, and our mournings, all of these things have been affected and or changed. So we must ask ourselves, what do we do in our lives when our life has been given a really, really good shake? And the philosophies of this world, or the wisdom of this world, encourages us in one direction, where biblical wisdom pushes us and directs us in another direction. So the world's philosophies or wisdom says, you know what, in this particular situation, you need to get mad at it. Or perhaps you need to be clever, or perhaps you need to be ruthless. Yet Scripture doesn't call us to be mad. It doesn't call us to be ruthless. It doesn't call us to be clever. Rather, it calls us to be wise. We are called to take that which we know and to practice it. We are not to be a mad people. We are to be a peaceful people. We're not to be panicky. We are to be calm. We are to be a people who are marked by our wisdom, by our peace. So this morning, as we come to James chapter 3, and again in verse 13, what James is going to do is he's going to look at the whole concept of wisdom from above and wisdom from below. And when we talk about the wisdom from below, you have to put wisdom, in parentheses, not in parentheses, but in quotation marks, because it's really not even wisdom. It's only wisdom in name only. So come with me, James chapter 3. We'll look at verses 13, and he writes this: "Who is wise and understanding among you?" Now, again, he's starting with the belief that everybody wants to be known as wise. I mean, I don't know of anybody who wants to be known as a fool. And so if you want to be a wise person, he says this, he says, by his conduct, or her conduct, as the case may be, but by his conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. So let's look at that last part there. In the meekness of wisdom, or in the idea with humility, which goes along with wisdom. Humility and meekness are not things that in the first century Greco-Roman world they were not valued. Now in the Jewish world, sure, they were valued, and it's definitely a Christian virtue. But in the Greco-Roman world, it is the aggressive person, it's the confident person. These are the people who are well thought of. And as you come across this this idea, I started to think about American society, and I was trying to say, is humility, is meekness, is that something which we as Americans, is that something which we value? And I'd have to say that, just judging from some events in our past, I don't know if that's really the case. We go back to the last presidential election. We had, the two major political parties and the two major candidates, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. Neither of these people were known for their meekness or their humility. And so we looked at them and say, well, those people will get things done. Well, yeah, they might get things done, but are they going to get things done in an appropriate manner? And so I don't know if we are people who are too excited about meekness or humility. Yet I find that is the major. That is a major descriptor of what biblical wisdom looks like. Not only is there the idea of meekness or humility, but there's also the idea of an action which goes along with it. He continues on. He says, by his good conduct, let him show his works. And so again, if you are a wise person, you're not just somebody who knows something. You're not just somebody who says something, but you're somebody who lives it out. So wisdom is knowing the right thing to do, and then it is doing it. A twofold proposition. You have to have that. So our faith cannot be faith in word only. In the same way, wisdom cannot be wisdom in word only. But there needs to be a corresponding action which goes with it. Otherwise, it's just theoretical, and therefore it is not actual wisdom. And so our wisdom should be seen by others. Now, you may object to that. You might say, well, hold on a second. We know from the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 6 that Jesus condemns those people who do things publicly, publicly to be noticed, though. I think that's an important idea here. So the Pharisees, when they would go out on the squares and to pray out loud prayers and to have their long robes, they did so that they might be seen in public. And in the same way, when they gave their alms and they made sure that their coins clattered really well, that was so that they could be seen. And so what we are to be is we are to be a people who are constantly and consistently living a wise life. And then, even by happen chance, people will see us. It's because we are living consistently a wise life. And it's not that we would receive glory. It's just that we are so consistently doing so that it is recognized. And so that's the wise person. The wise person lives so wisely that it is seen in his works because it's consistently shown in his works or her works, as the case may be. Now, this is not our natural tendency. The idea of humility, the idea of meekness is not something which comes naturally to us. We are people who oftentimes get really wound up when our rights are affected. We are very good at saying, this is my right and this is how I was wronged. We are more than happy to go about teaching people a lesson. Let me show you how important that I am. Folks, that is not the way of wisdom. And you might say, well, come on, it's kind of natural for us to live that way. It's kind of normal. It might be normal and it might be natural, but it's not Christian. And James is writing and he's saying, listen up, Christian. If you want to live a wise life, it is one that is to be marked by humility, and it is one which is also shown in your good works which you're doing. Now, the rest of this whole section is a contrast, and it's a contrast between the wisdom from below and the wisdom from above. So let's come back to our passage. He says, but if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. And that's what you have. That's the wisdom that is from below. So when we don't get our way, sometimes we can be horrendous. We are not to be a people who are marked by bitter envy and selfish ambition. That's not how we are to be. Now, I've met some people who are very resentful, very hateful people. And sometimes these very resentful and hateful people, they get things done. But they may not get things done in a godly way. We live in a very pragmatic world. We look at I don't like the way he does it, but he gets it done. Or I don't like the way she does it, but she gets it done. And because they have a payoff at the end, that atones for their method. No, that is not correct. Not if we're looking at the idea of biblical wisdom. Now, again, coming back to this, he says, but if you have a bitter jealousy, a zeal which is turned on its side, if you will, a selfish ambition, if that's in your heart, do not boast and be false to the truth. Okay. The word here for boast is a compound word. It's the idea that boast against, but there's nothing to boast against. So we sort of have to supply it. It's kind of like don't boast against the truth and therefore negate wisdom. The today's English version, which was recommended by Douglas Moo, translates this section this way: don't sin against the truth by boasting of your wisdom. Don't do that. Bitter wisdom is not real wisdom, ladies and gentlemen. What does he call it here? He says this is not the wisdom that comes from above, but it is earthly, it is unspiritual, and it's demonic. Again, quoting from Douglas Moo, he says this. He says, in some then, this false wisdom, which does not lead to good works and humility, is characterized by the world, the flesh, and the devil. In each of these ways, it is the direct antithesis of the wisdom that comes from above, heavenly in nature, spiritual in essence, and divine in origin. And yet, oftentimes in the church, we're willing to say, well, that's... But the worldly wisdom sometimes works, so we're willing to go ahead and to push that to the forefront. No. We're not called to be pragmatic. We're not called to be pragmatic. We're not called to be clever. We're not called to be ruthless. We're not called to be mad at the situation. We are called to be Christian. And biblical wisdom is one which is marked by humility and it's marked by good works. The Message translates this section this way: twisting the truth to make yourself sound wise isn't wisdom. It's the furthest thing from wisdom. It's animal cunning, devilish conniving. I think that's pretty good there. Let's look at the effect of worldly wisdom. Verse 16, for where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. Disorder, chaos, every vile or base thing will take place. Think in an unspiritual way. Do not be surprised if unspiritual things happen. Don't be surprised if the end is horrific. You know, as we look at the news throughout this week, there's a lot of big stories going on there. I mean, there's the coronavirus, and there's spaceships flying up into the atmosphere. But we also have the major story of the horrendous things which are happening in Minnesota and in Minneapolis, and where a man, Floyd George, is killed, murdered, we believe, by a police who have gone way overboard. And this is a horrific thing, and all you can do to that is just say that's horrible, and people need to be held accountable for this, and some people need to go away for a very long time. But not only is that horrible, but we see that the response to that has also been horrible. And we have cities such as Minneapolis, which is on fire. And the wisdom of the world says, get mad at the particular situation and Go for it. Well, when we get mad at the particular situation, according to James, you know what happens? You get chaos. You get disorder. You get all kinds of awful things happening. I mean, we have people down in Portland, 1,000 miles away from Minneapolis, and they are using the excuse of what has happened to Floyd George to burn down things in Portland, Oregon. And I have friends of mine who will justify this behavior, Christian friends of mine who will justify this behavior, but I don't see how that can correspond to the book of James. When our decision making is based off of bitterness, the effect cannot be good. Listen, we are complicated and complex as people, as human beings. We know, and we can read these words and say, oh, we're supposed to be humble, we're supposed to be meek. And we can read those words and say, okay, that's how we're supposed to be, and we can't get around that. So we find other methods to subvert that and to get around that. Perhaps we might say, well, my situation is different and you don't understand. So we discard Christian teaching. So you have problems within the church. There's fighting within the church. And you justify the fighting within your church to say, because my situation is different. You don't understand. I've seen people use sociological and theological excuses for using their own, for trying to get their own way, for promoting their own selfish ambition. They know that they can't say, well, this is my preference, for example, which happens in the church, and because they know that that's selfish, and so they have to come up with a way to camouflage it. We'll call this camouflaged wisdom. I've seen this. A person is used as almost like a shield for their preferences. And so you might have some people say, well, the old gal in the church, Mary Lou over there, she won't like the changes which are being made in the church. So for the sake of Mary Lou, let's not make a particular change in a church. Now, it may not have anything to do with Mary Lou. It might have something to do with the messenger who has a particular agenda. And you see this all the time. Or if you don't want to name Mary Lou, you might just say, well, some people. And the anonymous some people. It's amazing how many churches have a deacon board or an elder board, which half of it is made up of some people. An unnamed group of people who are presented at meetings and who have power and no name. I don't tend to respond well when people say, well, some people. Well, then name them. Then name them. I see people who have theological cover. I have seen churches, I've seen organizations, Christians, and good Christians, at least you like to think so. And they tear the organization and they rip it apart. And you ask them, how can you take that particular position, or how can you do this? And they say, well, I've prayed to God and he has given me peace. I think that's taking prayer and using it as a ploy to justify sinful activity. Number one, did you really pray about it? And number two, I'm not sure how in the world that God gave you peace in that, especially when you're dividing the body of Christ. You might want to rethink that one. James wants us to be a people not marked by wisdom from below, not to be marked by an earthly wisdom, a demonic wisdom, a selfish wisdom, but one that is from above. And so let's look at the positive part. It's nice. He finishes up here with the positive sections here. He says, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy, good fruits, impartial and sincere. Look at that. I mean, as I look at that, it almost looks like Paul in Galatians has the fruit of the Spirit, and you have those aspects of the fruit of the Spirit. And James doesn't do that, but this is almost like James' accounting of the fruit of the Spirit here. It's very, very similar, is it not? And so we have 7 descriptors. And when we start off, he starts off, it's first pure. And I think pure is therefore defined by the things which come after, the 7 descriptors afterwards. And those 7 descriptors coming afterwards, they're grouped into 3 different groups. And those 3 different groups, anyway, there's 3 different groups there. And it doesn't make any difference if you group them into 3s or not. But I think structurally, that's how it's done. So look at the first. He says, first of all, it is pure. Okay, that's the overall concept. It is pure. It is faultless. And what does it look like to be pure? Well, here it is. It is to be peaceable, gentle, and open to reason. Now, I told you these are in groups, and this first group is a group of 3. And the reason that we know that these first 3 are to be grouped together is that each word starts with the letter E. Think of it this way, okay? So they all start with the same letter, and they all end with the same sound, sort of an A or an ace sound in Greek. And so you're supposed to see them together. Now, is there a reason that they're together? It may just be it's easier to memorize. That's a possibility. But all of them look at the concept of wholeness or for the benefit of others. Peace looks at wholeness. We look at the next one here. We are to be peaceful. We are to be gentle, kind to one another. We are to be open to reason. And I like open to reason. I think it is to be considerate and listen to both sides. The wisdom from above listens to people. We are to be a people who are full of mercy and good fruits. Mercy, if we want to define that briefly, is simply kindness in action. Good fruits, it is actions which are inspired by faith. And the last group is a group of 2 as well. We are to be a people who are impartial and sincere. And again, both of these words, we know they go together. They both start with the letter A or alpha. And there is no showing of favoritism. There's no partiality. And that has been a major theme which we've seen in the book of James. We're not to say, well, this person is more important than this person. No. Wisdom from above doesn't do that. It values each person the same. They have value. They're made in the image of God. It's not fake. It is not hypocritical. That's the base word underneath the word here for sincerity or for sincerity. So here it is. That's the wisdom which is from above. That's how we're to look. So let me just read those one more time. It is to be pure, which means it is gentle, peaceable, and open to reason. It is full of mercy and good fruits. It is impartial. It is sincere. It is unhypocritical. The end effect of this, the cap of this, the result of this, and the harvest of righteousness is shown. And the harvest of righteousness is sown in peace to those who make peace. We notice a couple of things here. It's a harvest of righteousness. This doesn't mean that your problems all go away. This doesn't say that you will avoid inequities and persecution. This says that a harvest of righteousness will come as you sow peace peacefully. You know, you can't read this without hearing echoes of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, verses 9 through 11. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. And we don't like that. We don't like that. When people accuse us falsely, we say, well, it's not fair. And we're going to fight out. We're going to fight against that. And we look at the injustice of it. And what happens is that within a church context, you get people who are fighting one another, looking at their own rights, rather than looking at the benefit and blessing one another. It's not unusual in our lives. It's not unusual in church life to have our puzzle box get all shook up. I mean, if you've got it all planned out, good for you, but I can guarantee you, as soon as you've got that frame figured out, there's probably going to become a good shaking. And God wants you to adjust to it. You say, oh, I don't want to adjust to it. Well, I don't like to adjust to it either. I want to act naturally against that. I'm going to fight back against that. I want to get angry at that. Well, that might be natural, but is it Christ-like? I mean, that's the question. In the midst of difficulties, in the midst of trials, James, if we go all the way back to chapter 1, he says, count it all joy, brethren. Count it all joy. The situation may be horrendous. I'm not saying that, oh yeah, I've been diagnosed with cancer. Well, count it all joy. I'm not saying that the cancer is good. But I am saying this. I'm saying that the things which we learn as we go through the trials and the difficulties, those can be good things. When you're in the midst of a shaken world, when you're in the midst of things which are causing you all kinds of grief, what is God teaching you? You have an opportunity to learn. And now you have to ask the question, will I take it? Will I be wise? Will I follow the world's path of wisdom and miss the big picture which God has for me? Or will I, in humility, seek his ways and live out the wisdom God has given to me? You have a choice. There's a choice there. A wisdom from above and a wisdom from below. God calls us not to be natural people, but to be Christ-like people. I hope that's your decision today. To be like Christ. To be a child of God who lives like a child of God. Not to be a person who takes the name of Christ and takes the name only, but takes the name of Christ and lives for him. You know, as I said last week, the book of James is a good book, but a difficult book. It challenges us. It encourages us to be a people who are not just a natural people, but a people who are living appropriately for the one which we call Lord. I hope this passage is a blessing to you, a challenge for you. And I hope you can take it from today and to live it in your life as you go forth. God bless you. And I want to thank you again for being with me this morning. God bless.